Speaking of data, let me bring in Eric Tsai from Joybird. Speaking of data, Eric is going to put the data in Data and Programmatic Insider Summit. Joybird, as many of you know, is a leading D2C home furnishing maker and retailer. And one of the things that Eric does at Joybird is really crunch the numbers and gather data, especially in his partnerships with major platforms like Facebook. Today, he's going to walk us through what the method is behind their message and the method behind how they work with platforms. Eric, where are you coming from?
I come from LA.
Oh, good. How's the weather?
Man, it's hot out here right now.
It's hot, really?
Yeah, California is burning up right now.
Okay. Yeah, literally. All right, Eric. I'm gonna turn it over to you. Tell us the way Joybird does it that everybody else can learn from.
All right. So welcome everyone. So I hope you guys can see my screen. And, I'm going to dive right into it. When I heard about this topic, it's really interesting because I'm not really an expert in any of these fields, but I think a lot of it, comes from, and I've been in the agency background. I also came, from on the client side, obviously now. So, it's really interesting to see how the space has grown. And most of it is that, I utilize these methodologies to guide my thinking and how we make decisions. And so let's talk about methodology real quick, why methodology and what that is. And so, what is methodology, right? It's essentially how you do something and then how you go about it and how you validate it and then be able to tell your boss, your managers, the bean counters and say, hey, this is going to make us more money. Now give me the budget. But at the same time, it's always interesting to find out how do you match reality versus what you see on paper, on reports. Because a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. And so, back in the days, maybe like almost 8-9 years ago, I was working in the agency and we were doing a lot of tracking. We're doing a lot of our own kind of pixelating of clients, websites and everything. And it really got me thinking about how do we go about data-driven marketing? And a lot of the times methodology is the key, right? It's how you think about how you approach, buying media or how you approach how media should be at a certain price or what is that going to do to your business. So in a very high level, I think everybody here are data-driven marketers. And there's a certain way you approach of, do you want to buy out of home? Do you want to buy podcasts? Do you want to talk to Amazon? Do you want to talk to Google? So all this has gone into those type of scenarios. And I've used the same thing about, how do you go about buying these things? How to go about testing them? And so part of it is to align how you do it to your business rules. And when we talk about business rules, is your operation methodology. How do you operate? Your resources, your finance, your people, right? The people, process, and the platform, the technology that you use. And how are you going to execute that? And the technology supporting the people in the process. How do you make the right decisions? A lot of times these seem very macro, high level questions. But when you get down to it, if you're just a media person, if you're just a director, even you're at a VP level, you can't be having all the answers to all these questions. But it's important that you try to get, as much answer to these questions as possible. And so a lot of it has to do with your operation methodology, how you operate, also your offering methodology, right? What is your pricing? What is your features and benefits? And then what are the strengths and weaknesses of your product? Who is out there competing with you? And why are you, better or inferior than these other guys, right? And then also assess your risk, right? How do you go about scaling? So if you get a test, you run for 50 grand and it performs well, can you see that go to $5 million? Can you see that going to $10 million? Because if a 50 grand test works, you can't scale more than $200,000, that's it. So is that a worthwhile investment in your time, given, especially now, with COVID and everything, everybody's lacking resources. Everybody has furloughed at some point. So these are the type of things you got to think about. And obviously you have your marketing methodology, right? So a lot of times, what we're here talking about, and we're in a marketing conference, we're in a data conference, we're talking about marketing. But marketing is just one aspect of the methodology. So you got to align all of these together, right? So here's the next slide, kind of show you how are they all connected together? How do they work together, right? So if your operations don't work well with your marketing and your marketing don't work well with the offering, there's a problem, right? And then you have frontline people who's helping you, selling your product. We now have stores and people are talking to our staff in our stores about our products and they see it online. And if they see something online that's different than in person, then you have a problem in terms of how do you match that? How do you communicate that? And then also, how do you go about getting a good profit and an understanding of your margins and all that stuff? So I know there's a lot of things happening right now, and I want to kind of take a pause just to give you guys an understanding of, if you connect the methodologies together, you know, and then we go to the next slide, you have to make a decision on, are you going to build that technology, or are you going to buy, you're going to SaaS that technology, right? And then who's going to be running that, right? Who's going to be your guy? Who's going to be your team? Who's going to be that trusted, you know, ally and partner that you're going to work with, right? And so a lot of times it could be an agency, right? It could be, you know, your in-house team you want to build. And then also looking at your promotion, your tactics within your offering. You know, a lot of times I see a lot of you know, give 100, get 100. You know, I think that works for certain brands, but for example, you know, our AOV is very high. So you're going to tell me that you want to give me $200 and to tell your friend to buy a $2,000, $3,000 furniture, and you're going to feel good about that. At a certain price point, it doesn't work after that. And so, but you can't just look at what tactics is out there and say, okay, let's just do that because everyone's doing it. So I want to give you guys kind of perspective on that. And the next thing is know your leverage, right? So it's important to understand what you're strong in and then what's in the ecosystem, and really look at that. Because a lot of times, a lot of things are shiny, like, you know, Facebook ads, Instagram, and those are great, but it may not work for you, believe it or not. You know, a lot of times organic works really well, right? Organic video works really well, but it takes time. And so it's important to understand, what are you going after? Are you going after a huge market or a niche market? Because as typically you go to scale, you're going to have high reach, like TV, the low frequency, unless you buy a lot, right? And they're lower cost per reach. But you get a lot of unqualified audience as well, because you're buying the good stuff with the not so good stuff, right? That's just a part of the game. And so if you're a niche, like, you know, for us, we started out as a niche market. So we're smaller. We have a tailored audience. We're focusing on mid-century modern furniture to start with. We tried many different areas. It didn't work. And we found a niche area, a mid-century market, and we laser focus on it. We figured, wow, the conversion really, you know, spiked, and things really work for us. And then the other thing is also really thinking about ROAS and things like that, measurements, right? So when we talk about measurements, I always challenge our team and say, you know, does it matter that we're making money, or are we just making noises, right? So if we're not profitable, we're just focusing on top line, that's different, that you're a growth company. And, you know, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of, you know, Joybird was acquired by La-Z-Boy, and they're a value company, right? They're focused on EPS and profitability. Those are important things for that business, but they work with us because they like our growth. They acquire our growth, and they want us to be part of that. And so understanding that is important, because when we're growing our business, you know, maybe the first few years, you know, profitability isn't a focus. And so it's about getting scale. It's about getting mass scale, volume. How do we build our factories so we can get volume? Volume product lowers our cost. When the cost gets lower, we can have more marketing money to go and buy media, to go and acquire more customers. So again, looking at all this, and then you get down to the nitty gritty, things like viewability, cross devices, things like, you know, attribution models. These are important, but I think it's important to understand from the very beginning. So part of the, you know, kind of strategy that we implemented when we first started is, you know, our media is not, you know, muddy yet, right? We were just a startup 5 years ago, bootstrapped, and we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of media. So the way to think about it is, well, if you just buy Google and people are buying from Google, you know, that's where the attribution is coming from. But if you're buying all kinds of media, you're testing all kinds of different things, you're going to have problems spending time and money and resources to try to get to the bottom of that. So it's important to know what you want to do first, second, and third, and being able to have a strategy against that, the measurements. And the last is your resources, right? Because who's doing what and how you're going to address things that you don't know. So part of it is, you know, when we realize that, oh, you know, there's going to be, what if there's going to be COVID part 2? What if there's, you know, where is the leverage on the team? Where is the leverage on the media? Meaning that everybody heard about the Duplo of Google and Facebook taking 60% of the media. Now Amazon's coming in. Sure. Does that mean you have to invest in Amazon? Does it mean that it's going to make you look bad if you don't invest in Amazon? It may not necessarily be, but it's important to understand, do you have the resources to align to that, as well as then that aligns to measurements, aligns to scale, right? So hopefully this kind of all makes sense. And then so I want to share the Joybird case study here real quick, right? How we kind of go about it. And a little bit of it goes into kind of our digital versus programmatic, right? Traditional media, how that really works. I think everybody knows that, manual process and everything. And then we kind of talk about the programmatic advertising started 2007. You know, some of the stuff are automated, but it's not really fully automated. It's a lot of rules-based. You upload your customer data, and they can bid against it. and you can A/B test and stuff like that. And now, in the couple of years ago, now really Facebook and some of those guys start taking it to the next level, right? They need real-time ingestion of live data and say, hey, this is not performing, this is performing, and then continuously giving you that feedback. And then over a long period of time, that's where you're going to get the outcome and the result and understanding of is something legit, right? Because a lot of times when you have low volume, your numbers can look great. When you start scaling, it just looks terrible, right? But it's not looking terrible. It's because you're casting a wide net and you got to figure out a way to optimize it. So hopefully this kind of all makes sense. So from Joybird, like everybody else, we started executing most traditional media. Like we buy Google search and we do the GDN, right? And then later on, we start shifting more media to programmatic because we don't have a lot of resources. We say we need some of this to be automated. GDN is very taxing, and we don't have the funds to hire agencies at that time as well. And so we figured out a way to, okay, how do we deal with what we learned in terms of methodology? And we learned that, for example, our sales cycle is extremely long. It's usually longer than whatever the 30-day attribution window is. So that means that after 30 days, you don't know what's going to happen. And so then we got to implement, DCM and double click to make sure that we have post-impression trackings and stuff like that. And again, nobody in the company has this knowledge. We don't know how to do that. We got to go figure that out, right? So a lot of it then comes down to us to figuring out all these things. And then when we have all the tools, then we realize, oh, guess what? Facebook and some of these guys are already building this, and we can kind of piggyback on it. And so while we are doing and growing our business, we still figure out a way in parallel, right, to build our own setup. So a lot of times, I'm sure you guys are already familiar with the fact that you can take your customer, take it to Epsilon, take it to a data company, they can profile them. They can give you more information on those customers. And then you can match that to media buying and stuff like that. But at the same time, everyone is doing that, right? It's also, do you understand the data quality, right? Is it important for you to go, again, it goes back to the discussion of like, are you going to cast a wide net, or do you really want to find somebody who's like a market in the next 7 days, right? How important is that? And so for us, we decided to leverage Facebook as a test platform, even though there's a lack of transparency, right? We know that they know everything, but we can't do anything inside. And it's very kind of challenging for people who are very data driven, who are very hands-on, especially direct response performance marketers. And so what we came away from it, a couple of years ago is, we know our business well. We know how to kind of work with our customers, with our product and our website. So let's focus on that because we're really good at that. And then we said, okay, let's focus on getting quality data so that we can see what customers are doing, what they're interested in, how those predictions can come true, and then identify what Facebook does well, right? Instead of trying to fight them, and trying to say, oh, what's in the black box? And we upload our data to them and what's happening in there, because you want to replicate that so that you can control that. But in reality, a lot of times you don't have control, just an illusion of control. You're just rationalizing it. And so ultimately we decided that, let's figure out a way that we can, use Facebook and integrate that into our business, right? And so part of what we did was we figured out like they're really good at machine learning and they have an algorithm that finds a market audience. So they send that in the market audience to our website. Great. Once people get to our website, we start building a yield optimization algorithm on our website as well. Like that didn't exist before. And we're like, hey, how do we continuously feed great data to Facebook, right? So once people come to our website and they go through our buying process or even just browsing, we can pass that data back to Facebook, right? And then they learn, oh, they looked at 10 products, they didn't like this. These guys are from New York and it's Tuesday, okay? They understand that data and they're going to be able to do better prediction than any of us can, because ultimately they are watching all of our customers, they're all watching all of our media, and they know that not only do people come to Joyberg, they also went to Crate & Barrel. They also walked into some stores. They also did all these things. We'll never be able to find out half of that information. But again, it may not be important to you to find out that information. It's only important if you think that important can deliver the outcome that you want. So ultimately, coming back to some of the data that we're sharing, so I'm giving you guys some insights. We send data like what people do here, like you can see the events and and their codes, and they have sequence, they have timestamps, and then it gets sent to Facebook. So once they know, like, oh, you just added to cart, but you didn't purchase, they know, okay, a lot of times in the past, we can just do retargeting. It's very easy. It's a big pool. But at the same time, when you're talking about converting people, you're not going to be able to do personalized, segmentation if you don't really know what the type of product is important, the AOV, and what the timing of things are. Again, these are all things that we try to pass back and work with Facebook on. And even that, they're developing what's called a conversion API, right? And it's upcoming right now. We're in an alpha with them on this. Essentially, instead of going to a browser and pixeling and getting that data, which gets lost, 30% of the data gets lost. So essentially, as great as we think we're tracking our customers with browser-based data, we're getting the data gets lost. The data we have in our hands can be now loaded to a server, and they access that server data directly and have a higher matching rate. The higher the match they are, the more information they have of the customer, the better prediction outcome they can have for us. So part of that setup we have is, we upload our customer data, and we also teach Facebook, okay, this is someone who bought from our store. This is somebody who went to our store but didn't buy, but also, later on buy online. So they understand the different type of segment audience we have, and we can say, you know what? For this type of media, we just want to target people who buy in stores. We don't want people to buy online. Can you find us people who are more likely to buy in stores so that we can send those traffic to our store? So here's an example of how they do it through this type of system. And so, a lot of times also we figure that since Facebook is so widely used, everyone is so familiar with Google search and Facebook ads. They see ads, they know it, they can smell it miles away. But they also understand there's an experience associated with it. I think at some point, a lot of people are buying a lot of stuff from paid social now, right? I mean, I'm hearing people buying stuff from TikTok, right? And just because they're seeing some video and they see what is that plan there, right? Where can I get that? So a lot of it is to understand what are people used to. You want to go and meet them where they're at, right? It's important to focus on that. And then what do we do is once we learn that, okay, you know what? People are accustomed to Facebook. Let's focus on training Facebook's algorithm to optimize performance against our own experience, right? To maximize our yield. So part of it is we start building and improving our own algorithm. So an example that I'm showing here is our engine that positions our products. So on this page, you can see different products, different price points, and the algorithm automatically positions the product on category page to maximize yield. And the way that we do it is you think about it, let's say it costs you $3 per view and you have 10,000 views on that product. That product needs to be getting $30,000 a week or a month, whatever. These are arbitrary numbers, obviously. So you can understand this becomes what I usually call the money grid, right? So in your product, if you're selling e-commerce product, there's a money grid on your website every time, every single day. Are you maximizing the yield on that? Why is the product on top left, the product on top left? Now, I know a lot of companies have that already. I see it, you can see it in their codes, but the way we're doing it is we're feeding that back to Facebook as well, right? And then it essentially then allows us to sell products that are more in real time and feed into the demand. It's kind of like the fast fashion model, because they understand oh, wow, you're selling more of this style and less of this other style. We're going to find people who are likely this style. And then you can tailor your media and your creative against that as well. And obviously then, as we reposition the product, right, periodically, the algorithm learns, right? So sometimes, a lot of times we have to go to our merchandising team and say, hey, we're seeing an increase in these type of products. They look like these type of styles. Can we get more of these styles? Because then we can test the system and we can figure out how the system is going to drive demand as opposed to us trying to create a demand. So a lot of times we do try to create demand, but we also want to not go against the grain, right? We want it to be like, you know what? People like gray sofas. Let them be, right? And then our clickbait, our media gets a lot of click on our pink sofa, our bright color sofa, our blue sofa, but people buy gray sofa, right? So it's important to say, okay, maybe we show this, but we sell that. And then being able to kind of make the algorithm understand, part of it is we have to train the algorithm to learn the system that we're using, and passing that data back has to be quality as well. So hopefully this all makes sense. As we go back to what I was explaining to everyone about, being able to have Facebook as your primary in-market audience platform, right? So a lot of companies that I've seen, they try to build that themselves. I don't think it's a bad idea, but it's just going to cost you a lot of money. And is that the right methodology? Is that important to you that you safeguard, your trade secrets or your customer data? Because at the end of the day, part of the reason why Facebook is doing the conversion API is to address, the privacy issues. You're going to see more and more of that coming soon, because the browser is going to be blocked pretty soon, and to the point where cookies are pretty much useless, only to a certain point. Because now everybody visits the website, 2 seconds later, you see banners of that website, that brand everywhere, and I'm not sure if that's the greatest experience moving forward. but people do know those type of experience now. And so it's kind of like, can we do better than that, right? Is there a better way to continue that dialogue and that conversation? And so part of us also figured out ways to do incremental tests, right, on retargeting. So you know what, if we cut our retargeting by half, is it gonna really kill us, right? If we cut our cost, spent in Facebook in this geo, what does that do? How much of it is incremental? This is the biggest question that we always try to ask ourselves at Joybird, is that, what is waste and what is necessary? And then being able to continuously find more budgets so that we can do other tests in other areas and other channels. And so, my recommendation for everyone is to challenge your assumptions, right? It doesn't matter if it's the CEO or the founders or the management or leadership team. Ask them, why do we desire to know what's in the black box? Why do you want to know all these details, right? What are the advantages of owning and managing your own technology, your own platform, your own data, and your data science team, right? There's a risk associated to that. Same thing with, are you leveraging the strength of the company? So part of the strength that Joybird as a team we have is we move extremely fast, right? We're very fast, we're very test-driven, data-driven type of company and team. And so when we decide to do something, things can happen really fast. Now, when things happen fast, it's gonna have mistakes. It's gonna have probably errors, and we gotta be able to tolerate that. And unless you think speed is not important and is not a strength, then you know what? Then I gotta perfect it. I gotta perfect less error. I don't wanna have mistakes and stuff like that. So balancing that is important. And last but not least, I would always recommend people to focus on variables that you have control of, right? So a lot of times you can say, oh, I have control of my bits. Yeah, you can change the bits. But when somebody comes in, if a Wayfair comes in, Amazon comes in, which they do, come into our auction in search, they destroy our brand CPCs. They destroy it because they would inflate our CPC, right? Even when we try to bit jam them, it doesn't matter. They have unlimited money. Good. So part of it is kind of like thinking about the real areas that you have control in that you can win, and then being able to say, you know what, I got to set boundaries for these type of media. And then that's why, going back to this talk, when companies come to me, vendors come to me and say, hey, this is very good CPM, or this is very good, CPC. I'm just like, but it's kind of like saying, do you want to buy a $10,000 Bentley, right? Because there's a value perception associated to the outcome. You got to understand what the outcome is. Everybody knows what Bentley is, right? You're not going to buy a $10,000 Bentley because it's not true, But ultimately, the point, the same thing with our CPMs, right? If the CPM is really inexpensive, is that quality audience, right? How is that possible, right? And so those are the type of things that I would challenge everyone to think about, and also hopefully walk away with some learnings here. Thank you.
Eric, thanks so much. And I want to mention before we get to questions that Eric is going to be part of our roundtable on the data layer right after this in just a few minutes. There's a lot in there I think some of you may want to agree and disagree with, but certainly drill into greater detail with Eric about. Let me ask, I know that Ashley has a question. Ashley, you want to pop in and ask Eric your question?
You had mentioned clickbait ads. I am curious on the positioning with these clickbait ads and how that impacts the overall brand.
So clickbait ad has two functions, right? Number one is to help manage media costs, because when you have a good clickbait, you're going to get good CTRs, right? Then the quality score is going to be good. And obviously, the system will favor that, right? Because you're going to help them make more money. So part of it is to understand the role of clickbait in your in your media and your marketing, because a lot of times I would say that for us, the clickbait doesn't sell what the product is being shown. Does that make sense to you? So it's not necessary, I want to show the sectional and it's going to sell this. It doesn't sell that sectional. It sells other products on the website. But a lot of times also you can get something that you think is not a clickbait and it becomes a clickbait. So it's to understand kind of the role of those, and then being able to trace, kind of like contact tracing, right? Like, okay, what happens after someone clicks on this ad, and then what actually product they buy, when, and it doesn't matter, and what the comments are they saying as well, right? Now you can have all this information.
Eric, let me ask a wrap question. And again, Eric's going to be part of the roundtable in a few minutes, so we can pursue it there too. You started by talking about how much the method needs to integrate with the entire Joybird ecosystem in order to make sense. So let me tie this highly automated advertising system and algorithm back to your supply chain. What is the risk of your advertising and your customer acquisition actually getting ahead of your ability to supply it? And where do you come in and do anything manually to change that? How are you monitoring your ability to satisfy supply? And does this ever run the risk of outrunning it?
Yeah, of course it does. We are just like in everybody else who is in the home furnishing space, and we're blessed and everything, that we have so much more demand than we ever had. And so part of what we do is from a business aspect. So for example, most of our conversions are come from people who want custom furniture, and there's a lead time associated with it. So we can toggle the lead time, right? So unfortunately, because the demand is so high, I'm gonna give you a 12-week lead time. Do you really want to wait 3 months for this, right? If you do, God bless you, right? But if you don't want to wait for it, we kind of waste that money in a way, but we also are able to kind of stop it from a little bit, right? So we did it on our side as opposed to on the media side. So there's other ways to do that, right? And in your toolbox, that's why understanding your business and your operations is very important, and you work with the team on that. We're constantly ahead of our supply, by the way.
Eric Tsai from Joybird, thank you so much for this. We're going to see you in a few minutes in our roundtable.